Trump is a pathetic version of Joe Biden. Everything that the right-wing MAGA movement wanted to accomplish, everything that all the right-wing shit they're doing, Joe Biden is putting them to shame. And I'm going to show you guys a propaganda report. We've done a lot on how Morning Joe and the liberal establishment, their number one fascination is dehumanizing our enemies. So Putin is a thug, a tyrant, an evil dictator. The CIA and Pentagon strategy has been to demonize the enemies of the United States. Here, we have the front-running leading presidential candidate, a leader of a presidential party that is doing something we haven't seen before. This is a guy who definitely, and I'm going to show you guys another quote where he's talking about Macron, and he's talking about how Macron is appeasing Xi Jinping. So don't get twisted. And if you look at a lot of Donald Trump's quotes, this man is extremely anti-China. Extremely anti-China. But there's almost something you can admire about Trump where he's like, I'm going to be anti-China, but I'm not going to do this thing where I'm like liberals do, where we constantly dehumanize our enemies. This is Donald Trump saying, yeah, we got disagreements with China. China is our adversary. But you got to admit, Xi Jinping is kind of smart. You got excuse me. Man, I got a cough. Let me drink tea. Excuse me. Damn. You had and I'm gonna show you guys a segment that highlight what I mean. When you have liberals and Democrats talk about our adversaries, it's always goofy ass shit. It's always goofy shit. It's a projection, and it's stuff that is easily debunked. Easily debunked. You have to say that Putin is an incompetent nincompoop that is also apparently extremely dangerous at the same time. They do this thing where their enemies is extremely weak and extremely feeble, but they're actually a great threat at the same time. So what the establishment is complaining about regarding Donald Trump is that he's not doing this thing where he dehumanizing our enemies. So I think I want to show you guys some reaction to this. And my favorite, obviously, is Morning Joe. Because Morning Joe, among the accepted Democrat establishment, is probably the neocon channel. And this is why I show you guys Morning Joe more than any other channel. They have all the establishment heads. They have all the CIA operatives, Pentagon officials come on here all the time. Joe Scarborough, the lead anchor, is as far right as anyone on TV. As insane as anyone on TV. People freak out over Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is nothing compared to Morning Joe, who supports like giant police state funding. He constantly attacking Democrats over being soft on crime, even though they literally on paper not. So like Morning Joe see what all these black mayors doing, increasing police budgets. He sees Joe Biden taking COVID money and sending it to the police. And Joe Scarborough's like, oh my God, why are the Democrats so soft on criminal justice? He is a psychopath, guys, of the highest order. Ever since the start of the Ukraine war, been calling for war with Russia. The guy who's been fear-mongering over China probably just as much as a Tucker Carlson or a Lauren Ingraham or any of the other relevant Fox hosts. As bad as it gets. But because this show is the voice of the empire, that's why I think it's worth breaking down, because you see the talking points here first, because it's a show that's in the morning, and someone who have done the propaganda reports for quite some time now, I have noticed Morning Joe come on at 5 a.m. where I live. They will be the first one to hit all the talking points, and once you watch them, everyone repeating the same thing that Morning Joe is saying. It is the pulse of the establishment, and you know exactly what the United States empire is saying when you listen to the show. So let's break down their assessment of Donald Trump praising Xi Jinping, which is, he say he was pretty smart, right? Which is not like glowing praise, but it's something you would never hear these scumbag, xenophobic liberals say, right? So let's get started, and there are a lot to say on this.
Truly effusive praise for authoritarian leaders from former President Donald Trump during an interview last night.
And I'm going to keep making this point. He said Donald Trump he got leaping praise towards authoritarian leaders. Said the show, I'm not even talking about the channel, the show that constantly praises George W. Bush. The show that constantly praises Joe Biden. And this is why I actually have the politics that I do. Like, people think that RBN, people think that Nick Cruz, people think I am unreasonable because I have zero tolerance for war criminals, for these criminal thugs in our ruling class. So when I see people praise Barack Obama, when I see people vote for Joe Biden, when I see people apologize for the squad now, with the squad's pro-war voting record, with their strike-breaking voting record, that makes my skin crawl. I hate watching people, especially members of the proletariat, praise our corrupt, criminal ruling class. But Morning Joe and the liberal establishment, they do it all the time. With the biggest criminals on the planet, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, all these people get linked, praised upon these people. But whenever Donald Trump praises Xi Jinping, oh my God, how dare you praise an authoritarian tyrant dictator? And my response to that is, you guys do that every goddamn show. Every goddamn show when you praising any Democrat who supported the Iraq War, Afghanistan War, or hello, the most recent one, the Ukraine War. So from my radical point of view, you have NATO left, professional boutique progressives, and liberals who are constantly praising criminals. So you guys see the same anger that these establishment hosts have towards Trump for praising Xi. You guys see why I have that same anger towards people who praise politicians in general? Because look at how the United States and the West speak about other countries. When you see how the West criticize other countries, that is how we should criticize our country. Because they mastered projection. And I'm gonna shut up because in this segment, you see them do it all the time. Every criticism that they have of China and Russia, you can easily apply to the United States. And the funny thing is, a lot of times they be lying about China and the DPRK and Russia. They fuck around and say the same thing that applied to the United States. They will say stuff like this: Russia is a police state where people do not have the right to protest. And I have a question for you guys because there's a lot of videos of protests going on. Every time there are protests, the police meet with lethal, violent force. If you have police that meet protesters with lethal, violent force shooting rubber bullets at them, is protest really allowed? Because I remember I was at the Kansas City protest, and they hit us with tear gas, hit people with rubber bullets who wasn't even part of the protest. So my argument now that I'm making in 2023 that we barely had the right to protest. We don't. The cops will assault you for protesting. But people think we got these rights. But anyway, sorry, I'm ranting enough. Jesus Christ. Let's get started to this video. I think this video is going to take a while to break down. Let's start.
Truly effusive praise for authoritarian leaders from former President Donald Trump during an interview last night on Fox News. Here's what he said.
They're all top of the line. Our guy's not top of the line. Never was. These are top of the line people at the top of their game. President
This is the quote we just played. Watch how Morning Joe completely melts down at this quote.
All over Hollywood to look for somebody to play the role of President Xi. You couldn't find it. There's nobody like that. The look, the brain, the whole thing. We had a great relationship.
Donald Trump said if you was to go to Hollywood and find anyone to play Xi Jinping, you couldn't do it. Now, that's funny. As someone who hates Hollywood culture, celebrity culture, that's funny. That's funny. And this is what Morning Joe is about to freak the fuck out about. Let's continue.
We got along so well. There was a great chemistry we had. Great. We talked about everything. A great chemistry. But people ask me, how smart is she? I said, top of the line. You never met anybody smarter. How smart is Kim Jong-un? Top of the line. You know, people say, oh, this and that. Really smart. You know, when you come out and as a young man at 24, 23, even though he sort of inherits it, most people, when they inherit, they lose it. And that's easy stuff. He took over a country.
The funny thing is, Trump is actually speaking of experience there. The whole thing about inheriting and losing. Look up how much his dad bailed out his businesses who went bankrupt multiple times. So the funny thing is Donald Trump is actually speaking of experience, but I'll let it continue.
You're very smart people, very, very energetic people, very tough people at a very young age, and he has total dominant control. That's not easy. These are very smart. Putin, very smart.
It takes your breath away. I mean, Joe,
It really does.
Talking about
takes your breath
she
away.
like a matinee idol, the Hollywood look, the brains, all of it. And we have to remember in the case of Putin, but we can go through all three of those. Putin right now is for more than a year conducting a war in which he's killing Ukrainian children. He's killing civilians, attacking their infrastructure. So he's always praised Vladimir Putin, but to do it at this moment in history makes it all the more extraordinary.
What does that sound like? How dare Vladimir Putin praise someone who is waging war? Said the channel and the culture, your entire culture, praises Joe Biden, George W. Bush Jr., and all of the worst neocons and war criminals. The United States and Joe Biden, who is actively funding genocide, you guys praise. So, let me turn that around. How dare you, Morning Joe Scarborough, imply that people should vote for Joe Biden, the guy complicit with 2 million dead Iraqis, with arming and being complicit with a genocide in Yemen, with arming the insane genocidal regime in Israel. How dare you praise them? You guys see how there's almost a mirror here? This is how you should talk about our politicians. RBN, we have it right, guys. When we have massive disdain for the squad and the NATO left and the people who are complicit with war, you guys see the disdain they have towards Putin for waging war? That is the rage that we should have towards the establishment all the time. The United States empire tells on itself, and I really wish I remember this quote because I actually stole it for someone else. When someone said, if you want to know how to talk about your politicians and your government, watch how your government talk about their enemies. I'm going to repeat. If you want to know how to talk about your government, you want to know the energy that you need to have towards your government, look at how the neocons talk about China. Look at how they talk about Iraq. Look at how they talk about Iran. Look how they talk about Venezuela. That's why I say we live in a capitalist dictatorship. They love throwing the word dictator around. There's no greater dictatorship than the United States. If you guys don't believe me, I have a question for you guys. If we wanted to get rid of Lloyd Austin, if we wanted to vote Lloyd Austin out of politics, what is our option? What about Neera Tanden? You guys know Neera Tanden has a job? The American populace voted to keep Neera Tanden out of government when they voted against Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton lost, and she's still in government. Susan Rice, all these people, their careers span multiple administrations. You had to, how do we vote the CIA out? How do we vote the Pentagon out, guys? Don't worry, I'll wait. We don't. No better example of a capitalist or any dictatorship than the United States. So that's why I use the language I do. I learned that a few years ago. The language that they use against us, I use against them. Big shout out to my homie, Black in the Empire, always speaking truth to power. Big shout out to the homie, Black in the Empire. Love when I get a chance to watch Nick go. Much love to Black in the Empire. If you get now on Twitter, make sure you follow my man. My man dropping knowledge every day. Mostly I see a lot of it about, he tweets about a lot of stuff, but the Ukraine war, been on point since day one. Like, if I had to pick one, like, especially Black leftist account that is hated more than me, probably Black in the Empire. Like, for real. Like, liberals probably hate that guy just as much as they hate me. But let's continue the video. Much love to the homie, as always. I'm gonna continue this video. We didn't even get to Joe yet. Like, this video is so glorious because, like, corporate media used to enrage me, right? Like it does most people. But when I see this segment about them crying about the end of United States dominance, when they complaining about shit like this, dude, this is nothing but funny shit to me. And it is very revealing of the liberals because they're going to run against Trump in the next election complaining about the fact that he's less unhinged on the global stage than we are. He actually won. to have conversations with Xi. He actually humanizes our enemies. That's how you run against Trump. But sorry, let me continue the video. There's a lot to say.
Well, and she has become more dictatorial over the past 5 years.
Not true.
There are two people I read, two people who just got a small group together to protest in a seaside town, and they're going to jail for over a decade. You look what,
dude. I promise you guys, look into this shit. They always say this shit. They will say shit like this. They will say people in China and Russia were protesting, and they were sent to prison. So according to them, anyone who showed any dissent toward the government is sent to prison. But China, who has literally 3 times more people than the United States, has less people in prison than we do. I repeat, China, with 1.1 billion people, has less people in prison than we do. But they keep pretending that China is this unhinged authoritarian country. And every single time, without fail, when you look into these stories, when they said this protester protested, he sent to prison for 10 years, they were saying it during the Hong Kong Western PSYOP protest. And then when you look into it, they sentenced some guy to 10 years because they set a building on fire, because they were like attacking and assault a cop, right? Like normal government shit. Like in the United States, they are charging people with domestic terrorism. You guys understand? They are charging people with domestic terrorism who is protesting Cop City. And this is why I tell you guys, do not bring your phone to protest. Because you know what they do in the United States? If they will arrest people for protesting, and then if there's a crime in the area, they will use your phone location, and then they will frame you for crimes. That's why you shouldn't bring your phone to protest. They use your tracking location to pin crimes on protests in this country. They made it illegal to protest near politicians' homes. You can't protest near the Supreme Court. Can't protest near Capitol Hill. And meanwhile, Joe Scarborough's like, oh my God, China and their anti-protesting culture. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. And you see, you're not being specific because every single time, and I remember during the Iran protest, they said, you guys know that this person in Iran was sentenced life in prison? They sent an Iranian protester to life in prison, and then you look up, that Iranian protester killed a cop. There's an Iranian protester that killed a cop, and then liberals in the United States complaining that Iran didn't allow them to. What would happen in the United States if we assaulted a cop, let alone kill them? You guys see the hypocrisy and the bullshit propaganda that the United States is filled with all the time? Oh my God, they sent this person in prison for a protest. Did Joe Scarborough mention what that person did? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let's play it again. Let's keep it going. Hope you guys see my point there.
two people who just got a small group together to protest in a seaside town, and they're going to jail for over a decade. You look what Putin did. Very smart, really. You sees a Wall Street Journal reporter. Yeah. Very smart. I mean, he's been, again, you look at the people that he praises, and first of all, it's abhorrent that he's praising some of the most evil leaders on the world stage.
You people, do you guys really believe that Vladimir Putin, even with the Ukraine war, has a larger kill count than Joe Biden and Barack Obama? Barack Obama was famously quoted as saying, I am very good at killing people. I am very good at killing people. And these are the people that Joe Scarborough and the liberals, they praise all the time. All the time. They are praising the biggest gangsters and mafia people out there. But how dare Donald Trump call Xi Jinping smart? That's the extent of Donald Trump's praise over Xi at the end of the day. Let's continue.
And this is something that he did starting here in 2015 when he came on our show and talked about how great Vladimir Putin was and how horrible Barack Obama was. And when we said, yeah, but he kills journalists, he kills politicians, he said, well, we kill people too. Again, there's something really screwed up in the way he looks at the world. And I must say,
I had to come back for that one. Anyone laugh at me? I'll play a part. So when he brought up how, oh man, I think Xi and Putin are decent people. Then and everyone remember this interview, and they were like, well, come on, man, they killed a lot of people. And then Donald Trump was like, oh, you think the United States is innocent? We kill people too. So someone telling the truth that the United States also killed people way more than Putin and Xi, so we shouldn't have this double standard. Joe Scarborough responds, oh my God, isn't it crazy that someone has this worldview? You know, the worldview of consistency? The worldview of consistency. I'll play that part again, because that part is glorious. I love this part. Let's listen to that part again.
Politicians. He said, well, we kill people too.
I'm going to go back.
Again, there's
more.
something
This is probably my favorite
said,
quote.
yeah, but he kills journalists. He kills politicians. He said, well, we kill people too. Again, there's something really screwed up in the way he looks at the world. And I must say,
something is really screwed up over how Trump looks at the world, because he acknowledged the United States kills people too. You guys understand how crazy this is? This comes from MSNBC. This is the channel that liberals respect. Donald Trump says the obvious, what every American is thinking. Why should we hate Xi? Why should we hate Putin? What have we done? How can we be the moral arbiters of the world when we do so many evil stuff? That's what Trump said. And this concept fries the brain, completely fries the brain of Joe Scarborough. I'll let it play. This part was so telling to me. So telling.
Politicians. He said, well, we kill people too. Again, there's something really screwed up in the way he looks at the world. And I must say, very disturbing for the cult-like followers that he still has that will worship a guy who worships the biggest tyrants on the globe. Caddy K, on top of that, Donald Trump is alone in calling Vladimir Putin very shrewd, very smart. The guy has wrecked Russia's military. He's wrecked Russia's economy. I don't care what all of these articles say about, oh, it's not as bad as that. No, he's wrecked the economy. He's ruined their trade, at least for now, with Europeans as far as energy goes. He had Europe energy dependent on him. No more.
Who do you guys, as Joe Scarborough explains this stuff, who do you guys think this hurt the most? As I showed you guys, the IMF have projected the Russian economy better than the United States. The Russian ruble is stronger than ever. The United States sanctions has failed. So Joe Scarborough, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is lying to their audience. He's like, oh my God, Putin destroyed the Russian economy, destroyed trade as BRICS continue to expand, as Russian economy continued to grow strong, as the ruble continue to go strong, as people continue to ditch the West, and people like Macron advocate for strategic autonomy. But meanwhile, Joe Scarborough is talking about the mishaps of Putin, and you're going to notice he's going to talk about the mishaps of Xi Jinping as well. And as this video continues, I want you guys to think about this. Imagine if Joe Scarborough spent his time criticizing the mishaps of Joe Biden, the same way he criticizes the mishaps of Vladimir Putin. Joe Biden is the guy who completely weakened our standing, and I'm speaking like in terms of a neocon, not me. I don't give a fuck. But from the United States position, Joe Biden has weakened our relationships with allies, isolated otherwise friendly countries like Saudi Arabia and India, who now been pushed towards Russia and China. You have Brazil that's completely rebuking the Biden administration's foreign policy. More than happy to have great relations with China and Xi Jinping, as Lula is set to meet with Xi here soon. But according to Joe Scarborough, it's Putin who made a mishap. Even though Joe Biden, and as a career, has led the United States off a cliff, which led the United States to be in a position where they're not a global nuclear power. But Joe Scarborough doesn't have that criticism. He's going to lie to you about how Putin put Russia in a tough situation.
Energy goes, he had Europe energy dependent on him. No more. And President Xi, one mistake after another over the past 5 years. And here's a guy who wants to run for president against Ron DeSantis.
You guys see what he said? Joe Scarborough, he said, oh my God, Putin making mistake after mistake. Look at all these mistakes that Putin is making. Xi Jinping making mistakes after mistake, even though Chinese economy has grown massively. Like what Xi Jinping has done in the last 10 years, it probably, like no other, what world leader has accomplished what Xi has done? putting China on the global stage as a global superpower. The amount of people that China lifted out of poverty over the last few decades. And I'm not saying that, and I'm not one of those people. I'm not saying that China and Xi did everything perfect. But what Joe is saying is that Xi Jinping and Putin are incompetent leaders who literally led their country off a cliff, even though China was a poor peasant country not too long ago. To the point where, if you look at the intro video of the stream, Joe Biden was laughing at the idea that Russia would run to China. That now China went from that to now a global superpower. But Joe Scarborough is like, oh my God, look at how China is failing. Look at how Russia is failing. Zero analysis of the United States and Joe Biden, which is way worse. Now, what I said before, the height of cowardice are the people who spend all their time criticizing other leaders. Joe Scarborough spends all his time criticizing other leaders. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is fucking shit up. Congress floats around a 15 to 21% approval rating at any given time. The American people hate our politicians. Over 50% of our country do not vote because they have no faith in the system. But Joe Scarborough, no criticism of that. He just fine. Nigga, I got a cable job, nigga. I'm good. Nigga, I don't give a fuck about the United States failing. I don't give a fuck about poverty. I don't care about the tens of thousands of Americans that die without health care every year. Have you guys seen Putin and his mistakes? Have you guys seen Xi Jinping and his mistakes? That is what MSNBC, the quote-unquote left network, leads with every morning. Every morning, guys. It's this shit. Let's continue.
Energy dependent on him. No more. And President Xi, one mistake after another over the past 5 years. And here's a guy who wants to run for president against Ron DeSantis' COVID lockdowns. He's worshiping President Xi, who had the most tyrannical COVID lockdowns on the globe.
Bruh. This is the funniest thing that the liberals are doing now. The liberals who attacked anyone who had criticism over the United States COVID policy. If you, like, I remember I was essentially excommunicated from the progressive left because I went on Jimmy Dore's show and said I don't support mandates. That was a year and a half ago. When was the first time I was on Jimmy, guys? That was a long time ago. I was on Jimmy Dore's show and I told him how supporting mandates is not the working class position. Supporting lockdowns is not the working class position. And liberals, in response to RBN and Jimmy Dore, they say, oh my God, look at all these anti-vaxxers. Look at all these people who don't care about people who are immune compromised. And then these same people would then look at China and say, oh my God, look at their oppressive COVID policies. These people turn into Jimmy Dore. These people turn into RFK Jr. on the fly when talking about China. We're talking about COVID restrictions. They all of a sudden sound like Jimmy Dore. Right? But anyway, let's continue.
And again, this is I don't know, is it projection? Is it confession? I'm not sure what, but it is so unbecoming of a former American president, and it speaks to his lust for authoritarian power.
You almost wonder whether he's doubling down on previous positions because he can't bring himself to admit that maybe he was wrong when he was president in his assessment of these authoritarian leaders. And so he has to say, no, I still believe it. But I mean, you run through the list of what those people have done. President Xi, who has crashed the Chinese economy during the course of his COVID lockdowns, is on the point of, doing exercises where he looks like he really might make a serious attempt on Taiwan. President Putin, who has just managed to expand NATO.
He just criticized Xi Jinping for doing military exercises. Do you guys hear that? She criticized China for doing military exercises in their own airspace. That's how much they are reaching. I think it speaks for itself at this point.
His border by 800 miles with Russia doesn't look like a very good strategic move, has lost hundreds of thousands of his own troops in Ukraine in a war that it just hasn't won him anything. And perhaps the most startling,
it hasn't won him anything. Jesus fucking Christ. Dude, this war started a campaign that will eventually lead to this bloom of multipolarity. Russia is stronger on the geopolitical world stage than ever because of their blooming relationships with Africa, India, China, and Brazil. Stronger than ever. But then look at the lies coming here. I don't think I even have to say anything. It's so obvious how much they're aligned here.
Of Kim Jong-un in South Korea, where he says he's totally dominant and that he had inherited this, but he has a very energetic, very smart people. Well, he has a people that is totally oppressed by a police state and risk going into a concentration camp if they do anything in terms of...
Now, the people at Morning Joe discovered the term police state. Now, I mostly do foreign policy breakdowns when I do Morning Joe because, dude, I swear to God, 80%, like 90% of Morning Joe segments are unwatchable. Don't get it twisted. I do more foreign policy breakdowns because I think the value is there. But like 90% of this show is garbage, and like a large amount of it is them literally manufacturing consent towards the American police state. You have Joe Scarborough at least 3 or 4 times a week, at least, goes on a spill talking about how Democrats are losing because the radical far left that wants to defund the police, he argues consistently over having a strong, well-funded, well-armed police state in the United States. He brought on Eric Adams, did a softball interview. He saw Eric Adams waging war against homeless people in New York. Morning Joe saw Eric Adams, who defunded libraries in order to fund the police more, brought him on and said he's doing a great job. This is the same show that is now calling China a police state. Remember, a country that has 1.1 billion people, 3 times more than the United States, but somehow has less people in prison than we do. Someone please explain how that makes sense for the quote-unquote police state known as China. Let's hear. This lady is so crazy. I see her all the time on the show, and she's here as the crazy blonde neocon lady. She's always the one that whenever I think Joe Scarborough is the most unhinged person of the segment, this lady comes in guns blazing every single goddamn time. Let's continue.
Oppressed by a police state and risk going into a concentration camp.
I don't want to hear that part again. The police state. I want you guys to hear that in full.
Very smart people. Well, he has a people that is totally oppressed by a police state and risk going into a concentration camp if they do anything in terms of trying to oppose him. And
once again, I'm sorry, but this is so much lies here, guys. I'm sorry. But Joe Scarborough was just talking about the quote-unquote authoritarian lockdowns in China. Do you guys know what happened about the lockdown in China? So in China, there was this massive lockdown, and then the Chinese people started to protest. You guys hear about that? Remember the protest that Morning Joe covered every single day? Every single day, they would say, oh my God, China is in disarray. China is in disarray because people are protesting the mandates and the lockdowns. And then you guys want to know what the Chinese government did? Did the Chinese government do what the United States government did and send police down there to tear gas and kill all the people down there? No. In response to the massive protests, China changed the COVID policy. You guys know that? And they lifted the lockdowns. So that put Morning Joe and the liberals that was cheering on the Chinese protests in a very awkward position. I remember this because I covered it. So they was like, look at China, they're facing protests, they're in disarray. China responded to their protests in a much more democratic way than our country did, and they lifted the lockdowns. And then after that happened, you guys, you want to know how MSNBC covered it? They didn't. They didn't make the obvious conclusion that anyone would make. Oh my God, so people in China protested and they got something? When was the last time the American people protested something and they got something? And do not say the Vietnam War. When the United States protests, when we protest, they proceed to beat the shit out of us, and then a bunch of right-wingers call us thugs who deserve it. The reason why I say don't include Vietnam, because despite mainstream American knowledge, the Vietnam War ending had nothing to do with protest. I remember I used to think that too. Nope. The American government, the Pentagon, all of them realized that they were getting their ass beat by the Viet Cong. They realized the war is not going well, and they accomplished everything they could possibly strategically. So they left, and the protests had nothing to do with it. They got their ass beat in Vietnam, and that's why they called off the war. And then later they rewrote history and said, man, we really want to go to war in Vietnam, but if only the people didn't protest, we would have beat the communists. No, y'all got your ass beat, son. Y'all got your ass beat by farmers in Vietnam. And then you guys said, because of the protests. Get the fuck out of here. Anyway, let's continue the video.
The degree to which Trump admires these leaders who are dictators, and in the case of Kim Jong-un, certainly a really aggressive police state, ruthless leader of his own people. It's astonishing to hear.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I literally can't go. I apologize, guys. I cannot go 5 seconds in this goddamn video. I don't even know why I picked it. I don't know why. Listen to this part again. How does this not describe the Ferguson protest? How does this not describe the George Floyd protest where I was tear gassed, guys? You guys know that. I know a lot of people following my work now. But when I first started, I went viral because I got tear gassed at the Kansas City protest, and I did a citizen journalistic report that exposed the KCPD. What they were saying was a lie. They were saying that it was attacked by the protesters, but I was there. They tear gassed children at a park that had nothing to do with the protest. But tell me more, blonde neocon lady, about how China has unhinged police policies that brutalize their people. You guys see what I said earlier? The way they speak about United States adversaries is how we should talk about our government. You guys understand? When they talk about police brutality, the brutality of the police repressing free speech in China and Russia, that's why I use that language here. Because they know that by saying that, it's effective propaganda against the country. Now, if that is what we're doing, I'm not doing propaganda. I am telling you the facts of what this country is like. You guys think communist countries are authoritarian and evil? No, it's the United States. It's the United States. Man, dude, I planned a few stories. I'm almost an hour in. This video is so hard to get through. I'm going to let it play a little bit more. A few more things I want to break down tonight.
A really aggressive police state, ruthless leader of his own people. It's astonishing to hear him say this, let alone she's the look, whatever that means, the Hollywood look. I mean, is that really perhaps what it's really all about? That he likes the look and the feel and the power of these people and wishes he had it himself.
Absolutely. That's always what it's about, the look for him. And Michael Steele, we know that Donald Trump continues to grow his lead in this early polling in the Republican primary. Another poll yesterday showed his lead over Ron DeSantis even bigger than it was before the arraignment last week. But we also know that ABC Ipsos poll shows broadly, he has a 25% favorability rating in the country, talking about Donald Trump, a man running for re-election, not just in a primary, but he has to run in a general election to become president again. When you hear this as a Republican, even if you're a staunch Donald Trump ally, if you're somebody who's maybe looking around a little bit at Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley or Tim Scott, who we expect to hear get into the race today.
And I'm explaining, and I know a lot of you guys don't watch Morning Joe like I do. Like, become something that's deeply entertaining for me. So Morning Joe, this is a common theme of Morning Joe, where they pretend that there's some renegade Republicans out there that are upset about Donald Trump. There are these good Republicans like Joe Scarborough. We are representative of the Republican base. And there's only a few Republicans who like Donald Trump. There are a lot of people who are actually held hostage. Now, to burst this bubble, where they pretend that there are these Republicans who hate Donald Trump. Do you guys know that Hillary Clinton had a less favorability rating among Democrats than Donald Trump did? More Republicans follow up and voted for Donald Trump in 2020 compared to Democrats who switched between Biden and Hillary. Democrats hate their own leaders more than Republicans do, like just based on the numbers. But they keep pretending that, oh man, there are Republican voters that are just looking for Nikki Haley. Like, they're like, oh my God, it's only a matter of time for Nikki Haley burst through the seams. That's what the guy just said. I'll let play. Listen to the part.
Be looking around a little bit at Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley or Tim Scott, who we expect to hear get into the race today. What do you do with what you heard last night? I know it's not new, and I know he's given praise to these men before, but is this something you want to run back again another time as president?
Yeah, I mean, look, from Donald Trump's perspective, first to start with that.
Well, let's analyze MSNBC, Morning Joe, Joe Scarborough, Michael Steele, 2 Republicans. Just two outright neocon Republicans giving their thoughts about left politics. This is MSNBC, guys. But I'll let it continue.
So you kind of set the floor. And I think the bottom line is Donald Trump looks at these men and he says, if I had that kind of power, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I wouldn't have to worry about a rogue prosecutor in New York. I wouldn't have to worry about a rogue prosecutor looking into January 6th. January 6th wouldn't have happened because the election would have been a foregone conclusion. The outcome would have been exactly what I wanted it to be. He admires these men for the power he wishes he had. And that's the kind of power he wants to laud over the American people, particularly those who stand in opposition to him, which brings you inside the party. What do they do with this? Well, they will do exactly what they did with it over the last 7 years. Nothing. What do you think they're going to do with it?
The reason why, and I want to add more context here because I want people to know who don't watch Morning Joe. Every day there's a segment like, when will Republicans quit Trump? When will Republicans had enough? Because remember, the premise of this show is that the establishment is good. The establishment is good. So their show constantly like, man, it's only a matter of time before the good Republicans like Liz Cheney rise up and kick Trump out. It's two-party duopoly apologia. These are the same people. The people on Morning Joe are very similar to Nancy Pelosi. You guys know Nancy Pelosi quotes. When Nancy Pelosi is like, man, is there nothing better than a country? We need a strong Republican Party. She often praises Reagan. These people love Republicans, guys. They love the two-party system. So when they see Trump, someone who they deem to be unsightly, to be someone who's not part of the team, they are still deluding themselves that, oh, the good daddy Republican Party still exists, and they will overthrow Trump at any moment. And I'm sorry to tell these people, that shit's not going to happen. And they always repeat this hopium, at best, what it is. But I'll let this video play just a little bit longer and move on. I think I covered a lot of this. So I'll let him finish up and I'll move on to the next
stand
story.
up and tell Donald Trump to shut the hell up. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And he is as bad as they are, which is why he shouldn't be within 10 feet of the White House. No one, not one, not one. Nikki Haley in her memos, she wrote a memo. She didn't call a press conference. She didn't stand in front of a bank of microphone. She didn't come on Morning Joe and have this conversation with this panel to say exactly what she wrote in a memo to donors. So look, let's understand the landscape here. Nothing changes unless they want to change it. Donald Trump has been, and will be through this cycle, the preeminent political dominant figure in the Republican Party. Why, Willie? Because that's what they want.
Yeah.
They want him.
And it's always funny how anti-democratic, and I think I end the segment there, how anti-democratic MSNBC and Democrats show themselves to be. Because as you hear at the end of the segment, Michael Steele was like, man, and this is what Morning Joe often say about Trump. He said, why don't the Republican Party do something about Trump? Why don't they do anything about Trump? They hate Trump, so why don't they do anything about Trump? Especially after his Ukraine comments, they need Republican leadership to stop Trump. And this shows how anti-democratic they are. Of course, Mitch McConnell and the Republican swamp monsters prefer someone else over Donald Trump. But they support Donald Trump because their base does. And that thought horrifies Morning Joe. They often talk about how, oh my God, the Republicans are afraid of their base. They're afraid of their base and they would never rebuke Trump. You mean following the will of their voters? So what Morning Joe want, they want super delegates, just like the DNC. So what Morning Joe wants, they want the Republicans to do the same thing and be successful that they did to Bernie Sanders. So they were decrying the Republicans for allowing their base to choose their leaders. Because MSNBC and their people are used to the Democrats who rig and select their candidates. So they look at the Republican Party like, why y'all allowing this shit to happen? Why y'all not? Now my personal opinions, I think they allowed it to happen because Trump showed himself to be a willing tool of the establishment. Still won't stand up for Julian Assange, right? Prosecuted Julian Assange. You had all these swamp monsters in the State Department like John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, Steve Mnuchin. They didn't clear out the swamp. So to answer their question, like the Republicans are okay with Donald Trump because they know he's gonna do. He's gonna handle business. They just don't like the appearance. They don't like the fact that this outsider beat them at their own game. And remember what he said in the segment. He said when Trump was on our show in 2015, with Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough and trying to hide from their audience, and they never mentioned it. If you and me and CJ, we watch a lot of these programs, they never mentioned how they was close friends with Donald Trump literally until Trump ran for president. Straight up, they used to go to each other parties. They was very social with each other. Trump used to go on Morning Joe all the time. In fact, I remember Morning Joe got a ton of blowback because it was like the first non-Fox affiliate right-wing news that hosted Donald Trump, and people attacked him for legitimizing Donald Trump. And now they're like super anti-Trump. They're trying to virtue signal to their audience that they're somehow a different faction of capitalism than Donald Trump. No, the fuck you are not. Morning Joe is no better than Donald Trump, and he arguably killed a person. But that aside, no, Joe Scarborough is Donald Trump in every sense of the word.